This is TV18 and you're watching CNBC-TV18.
Hello and welcome to Startup Street. I'm Shruti Mishra. Web Summit Qatar 2025 is set to take place from February 23rd to 26th in Doha, and it promises to bring together entrepreneurs, top investors, and leading innovators from the region and around the world. The Global Tech Conference will put the spotlight on technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. On this special edition today, we bring one of the Web Summit's key speakers, Jalak Jobanputra, founder of Future Perfect Ventures, a venture capital firm that focuses on investing in early-stage companies that are leveraging emerging technologies to drive innovation and tackle global challenges. Jalak, welcome to Startup Street. You know, you're a seasoned investor and a thought leader in the tech space. You've had an incredible journey in blockchain innovation. So first, tell us what inspired you to launch Future Perfect Ventures and focus on technologies like blockchain and crypto so early on.
Sure. Well, it's great to be with you. About 10 years ago in 2013 and 14, I'd been a VC since 99. I'd been a tech, telecom, and media investment banker before that on Wall Street in New York and London. And I had seen the evolution of telecom, such as broadband, processing power. I was at Intel Capital from 99 to 03 on the West Coast. So just saw how much growth there had been in infrastructure. And then also the fact that people around the world, billions of people now had mobile phones and more processing power in their hands than NASA did when they put a man on the moon in 1969. And so I was thinking of all this connectivity, this global connectivity, all this processing power, all the data that was being created by these technologies that I'd worked on over many, many years. And I thought there was a next stage of technology evolution, and that would take advantage of all this connectivity. Before, innovation was primarily in the Western world, in Silicon Valley and in certain centers. And now I thought, people all over the world could contribute because of the processing power they had in their hands, because of the data they were creating. And as part of my exploration, and I was thinking of artificial intelligence, I was thinking of Internet of Things, so satellites, mobile phones, all these data crumbs that we're creating. As part of my exploration of all this connectivity, I went to a Bitcoin conference in 2013 and became really fascinated at the underlying blockchain technology behind Bitcoin. This concept that computers around the world could verify transactions without a intermediary. So in the case of Bitcoin, it's not needing a bank and people in between a transaction to verify that this person owns this much capital and this other person is verified to receive it. And you're getting rid of this intermediary layer so people could directly transact with each other. And that played very nicely with this thesis of connectivity, of people around the world being connected.
All right, Jalak, like you mentioned, you've worked in many areas of tech and investment around the world. How has this global experience shaped the way you see innovation and, most importantly, its impact on society today?
So I always say one of the reasons I could see the promise of Bitcoin and blockchain early was because I'd spent so much time around the world in developing nations, as well as having spent a lot of time in the United States and Europe. And I had seen how many unbanked and underbanked people there were around the world, how much legacy infrastructure there was in the Western world. So a lot of people differentiated between developed and developing. They sometimes said first world and third world. The way I looked at it is the developing nations presented a lot of opportunity for new technologies because they didn't have existing infrastructure to rip out. So an example is mobile banking in Kenya. M-Pesa existed well before we had a true mobile banking in the United States. And that's because there was a need for people to transact. There weren't banks, and there was this new technology where people could transfer money with their mobile phones. When I went there in the mid 2000s and learned more about M-Pesa, they were amazed that we didn't have anything similar in the United States. And so I always look at the world as how can we leverage technologies from every part of the world? How can we leverage talent from every part of the world? And I think that's been a unique perspective that's allowed me to see some of these, the promise of some of these new technologies before even people in Silicon Valley did.
Jalak, let's now shift focus to the summit. You're one of the key speakers at the Web Summit Qatar. What excites you most about being part of this global event, and especially in this region?
Well, the region has an amazing demographic. If you look at it, it's a very youthful population, and that's true in India. That's true in countries around Africa and Latin America. So you have this built-in future workforce, existing workforce that is digital native and beyond digital native, Web3 native. So, for a lot of younger people, it makes perfect sense why Bitcoin could be a digital gold, why we should be able to have instantaneous transactions. In places that have more aging populations, they're again mired in legacy infrastructure, a different way of doing things. They're used to paying these high fees for wire transfers. And so I think any region that has this youthful population, this digital native population, this energy is an exciting one to invest in. I also think the Middle East has been very supportive of innovation, realizing they need to diversify their economies. And so I just think there's so much potential there.
So Jalak, share with us a sneak peek. Give us a sneak peek of the topics you'll be covering at the summit and why they matter for startups and entrepreneurs today.
I've been in the crypto sector for over 10 years now, and we've had a tremendous amount of growth from the underlying technology as well as usage. And in the United States particularly, and I think this will impact the rest of the world, we just had a presidential election where we now have a supportive administration and a supportive SEC and regulators in place. And so that was a big issue. And while there are countries around the world that have passed their own legislation, I think looking at the U.S. finally coming on board to this technology is going to spur innovation around the world. So entrepreneurs that maybe were just focused regionally can now look at the United States also as a market. And so I'll be talking a lot about that. I've been involved in on the policy side for quite some time now. And also looking at not only crypto, but underlying blockchain technology and how it intersects with AI. I mean, at the end of the day, like there are companies or technologies like Ethereum, platforms like Ethereum that are using smart contracts, which are innately utilizing a layer of data analytics and smart contracts. So there's a lot of intersection between these trends we're seeing, and AI, IoT, and crypto. And that was really the thesis of the fund over 10 years ago, and it's exciting to see it finally all coming together.
Sure. Jalak, the Web Summit is known for its focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. What advice would you give to startups attending the summit to kind of maximize their opportunities and their connections there?
It's a great group of folks that they gather. I would say, while it's great to get in touch with the speakers, learning from each other and finding out what all the different attendees are doing. I think preparation's always great in terms of seeing who will be attending and targeting, who you want to meet. But there's just so many other events that happened there, and so serendipity is a big part of it. Over the years, I mean, I've been going to Web Summit since it was in Dublin, and I've seen them grow over the years in different regions, and it's always the same energy, the same serendipity of meeting people that you didn't think you'd meet, or that you end up, working with many years down the line. And so I'd say look at it as an opportunity that way.
All right, Jalak, let's talk about Future Perfect Ventures. You've backed over 50 companies. The firm's portfolio includes a diverse range of startups that are tackling everything from artificial intelligence-driven medical diagnostics to the future of digital currencies. Can you share your top 3 bets? And if, you touched upon this earlier, but elaborate on your investment thesis as well.
Well, the investment thesis is I had alluded to it before, but it started off, and it's still very much the same from 10 years ago, which is the intersection of crypto and blockchain, AI and IoT would form the basis of the next internet. And what's evolved since then is the term Web3. And so, whether it's Web3 or, the next internet, that's been our thesis. We were very, very early. I think most people didn't understand how these technologies would interact, but right now we're seeing so many companies that are innately incorporating all of these technologies into their business models. Decentralized infrastructure is one area we're very interested in, which is with AI, you need a lot of computing power. You need a lot of data to create these large language models. Well, what if you could harness the data that's coming in from individuals, but you could compensate them for that data and create really robust, like, local language models, local AI models. The other part of that around the infrastructure is compute power. What if you could leverage computing power that's not being used and be able to compensate people on a micro basis for contributing computing power? And so right now we have these massive server farms that are analyzing data. That is really unfeasible from a longer term perspective, or I'd say not the most efficient from a longer term perspective. It may be feasible, but it's going to use a lot of energy. And so I do believe blockchain technologies can contribute to the growth of AI. Another area we're very interested in is this real-time payment sector and stable coins, and how different assets can be also put onto the blockchain. So one of my really interests around Bitcoin was the fact that anyone anywhere in the world could potentially buy it. So you didn't have to go through a brokerage. You could buy $10 worth, 100 rupees worth of Bitcoin, and you didn't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. And that gave access to people to an alternative to cash and depreciating currencies. And we've seen depreciating currencies all over the world, and not just in the developing world over the last 5 years. So imagine if you could then create other assets, bundles of assets, in the same way, fractionalize them and offer them up to people on an individual basis, and then assess risk and appropriately. So those are areas that I think, we finally have some of the underlying technology, we have usage, and if I look at the next 5 years, those are areas I'm very excited about.
All right, Jalak, thank you for taking us through some of the most exciting areas, trends, or innovations that you believe startups should be paying attention to. And blockchain adoption is growing rapidly. That's what we're seeing. What industries do you think are most ready for disruption using these technologies?
Well, we've certainly seen a lot of growth in financial services. This concept of real world assets, so getting money market funds onto the blockchain. BlackRock, which is one of the largest institutional asset managers in the world, launched that product. They're looking at other products, financial products, to put onto the blockchain. So that allows efficiency in transacting and buying and selling these assets, and creates efficiencies for BlackRock also internally. So I think financial services is certainly one. I think media, if you look at the proliferation of deep fakes right now, and this is again very related to AI and being able to create videos that are not real. Well, if you could actually track the provenance of that data, of how a video was created, what data came in, then you could more easily kind of alert when something has been generated versus, is truly valid. So those are two sectors. I believe healthcare is one that, at least in the United States, we have a lot of legacy infrastructure that has to be uprooted. But electronic health records, I mean, in the US,
Yes.
when we go to a new doctor, we still have to rewrite all of our medical history. Now, imagine if we could have a wallet with our own medical history that's portable, and so that's, to me, low-hanging fruit. And so every industry, in our view, just like the internet disrupted every industry will be impacted by blockchain technology. It's just a question of timing.
All right, and on that note, it's time for us to head into a short break, but don't go anywhere as we continue with our chat with Jalak on the other side. Stay tuned.
Mama must be missing us, nah?
Let's take you on, spin, give me one day. Feel the itch under my skin, it's a one day. You believe it when you see we ain't done, hey. It doesn't matter, just gotta get going.
New GT line, Taigun and Virtus. Volkswagen.
The most interesting things for us, especially in India, will be the falling cost of serving AI, right? And the falling cost of foundational LLM models. And I think that basically makes it economically feasible for large-scale adoption. We also expect to see a lot of improvements and developments in the Indic AI ecosystem, with a lot more India-specific use cases, vernacularization of AI, as well as adoption of AI by Bharat, right? Not just the India 1 and India 2 segments, but across the board.
पापा ने कहा इंजीनियर बनो, बन गया। हस्बैंड बनो, वो भी बन गया। पर मूर्ख बनो तो कहा ही नहीं। देखिए, नकली पेमेंट का एसएमएस, कहते हैं पापा का उधार लौटा रहे हैं, फिर बोलेंगे गलती से ज्यादा पैसे भेज दिए, बेटे बाकी के पैसे वापिस कर दो। आज्ञाकारी बेटा हूं, मूर्ख नहीं हूं। याद रहे, यूपीआई सेफ है, मगर कोई ऐसे बेवकूफ बनाए तो कहो मैं मूर्ख नहीं हूं।
Presented by HSBC. Co-presented by Cognizant. Knowledge Partner, the Udayti Foundation. Associate Partner, Reliance Industries.
Easy. Find a pet-friendly Italian restaurant with outdoor seating nearby and text it to Luca.
Find it real quick. Send it now. The place is sick.
When you talk about intergenerational, the study highlights that, out of every 3 families, there's only 1 family that has actually done a successful next generation to be brought in. What goes behind that? Number 1 is the legacy. Number 2, what is your family constitution and governing council? Number 3, how early you plan your succession and you get in your next generation, openly discuss at the dinner table with regards to what are the issues, how we can navigate that. And more importantly, is accepting the new vision which is brought in by the next generation, because they are the next in kin for you to take the legacy to the next level.
Deloitte presents The Pulse of Indian Family Businesses in association with CNBC-TV18.
Welcome back to Startup Street. We are in conversation with Jalak Jobanputra, founder of Future Perfect Ventures. Jalak, you founded the collective Future to promote diversity in blockchain. What steps can startups and ecosystems take to make innovation more inclusive?
I started Collective Future in 2018, and it came out of the fact that there weren't that many women going to these conferences, these blockchain and crypto conferences, but they were some of the smartest people in the industry. So I wanted to, get 20 of us together and spend a weekend together and learn from each other, and also get to know each other on a more personal basis. And what came out was, we shared a lot of the same challenges, and it was great to have a community when there's so few women in the sector. Now, as the sector's grown, we have more women. I would say, culturally, just being inclusive at conferences, right? Not being too. I remember in Miami many years ago, they did an after party at an adult club, right? That created a feeling of exclusion of some of the women that were there. So, just being mindful. That's a very obvious one, but I'd say just being mindful of the fact that, this technology is there to create a more even playing field for everybody. And I would love, I'd like to encourage more women to just, walk into those rooms, learn about the technology, contribute, because it's just so fascinating. And it's where the internet, I got into the internet in 1995. And I would say, those were some of the most exciting days of seeing the technology evolve. And that's where we are with crypto and blockchain.
Sure. Thank you for sharing those stories with us. But coming back to the upcoming Web Summit in Qatar, you mentioned earlier the opportunities the summit presents for the global startup ecosystem, especially the startups in Asia and Middle East. If you could elaborate on that also, Qatar is heavily investing in innovation and technology. What do you think are the key ingredients for creating a sustainable and successful startup ecosystem?
Creating a startup ecosystem is something I've been very involved with. When I moved back to New York from Silicon Valley in 2004, a lot of people in the Valley said, New York is not an entrepreneurial place. It's in terms of technology. There are very few VCs there. There are very few startups, and they had gone through the internet bubble like every place had, and then people had returned to Wall Street, to large media companies. But I looked at what are the components that make Silicon Valley so successful. One is this kind of supportive policy and co-working spaces, and entrepreneurs need space. They need to have environments where they can kind of fail fast. And that really wasn't a culture yet in New York, but over the last 10 years, we've seen it grow tremendously. And one of the components was when the Bloomberg administration really said, we're going to create the spaces for entrepreneurs, and seed funds were certainly important. So I helped start one of the first seed funds in New York City called NYC Seed. And so there was a lot of later stage money, but entrepreneurs need that initial capital, and not all of them have friends and family. So that was a large component. Another was serial entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs that were maybe from New York or had built a company in New York, and they were starting their next company, and they stayed. They didn't move to Silicon Valley, but they stayed in New York to do it. And that creates a flywheel effect. And I think, I certainly have seen this happen around the world, and I've talked to entrepreneurs who may have studied in the US who are now coming back to the Middle East to start companies because they see the potential. And I think that's a large component because entrepreneurs want to be in ecosystems where they can learn from each other, they can partner with each other instead of always getting on a plane. And with the government policies, with the number of entrepreneurs moving back, or people really looking at it as a career option, those are all things I'm starting to see happen there. And so I think that bodes well for the region.
All right, Jalak, one final question before we let you go. As someone who's been recognized as a trailblazer in blockchain investing, what is your vision for the future of this sector? How is Future Perfect Ventures positioning itself to stay at the forefront of innovation? What's lined up for the future?
Yeah, so each fund, we're currently investing at our third fund, and each fund, while we've had that same thesis around the intersection of those three platform technologies that I mentioned, Future Perfect Ventures has evolved as the market has evolved. And as I mentioned before, we're now at a stage where we're seeing entrepreneurs actually create these or combine these technologies in their startups. So we continue to evolve. This is the fastest growing sector I've ever seen. And if you combine the AI and the crypto, that it's 24/7. There are new developments on a daily basis. So and it's global. Unlike the internet, a lot of the initial technology was being created in just certain hubs, and this is everyone's contributing. This is open source software. Everyone has access, or a lot of people have access to ChatGPT and Gemini and all these tools to create new apps and technologies. So we're certainly keeping an eye on all of that. You always have to be aware of what larger companies are doing because the incumbents have all woken up to the promise of all this technology. But we continue to see entrepreneurs more than ever get excited about the sector, especially now that we have regulatory, a more favorable regulatory environment.
Absolutely. And on that note, it's time for me to wrap up our conversation. Jalak, many thanks for joining us on Startup Street today. Appreciate your time. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Startup Street. More news and updates coming up on the other side. Stay tuned.